think now is probably a good time to start sifting through all these questions and comments that we're getting. I see Matt Molnar says, what piece of the trade is the most underrated acquisition? Do we want to...
Papa's bring out, there's got to be Rocofoco. It's got to be a thing. Like, we got to get them on this.
To Matt's question, though, I mean, do you want to keep this just the players, or we can expand it to all the picks as well? I guess let's stick with players. Who's the most underrated acquisition in that group? I think we're probably on the same page, but I don't...
Underrated, I'm going to go 2 places. Kenny Martin Jr., just because I feel like we don't talk about him as much because he's not a veteran.
He's not as much of a known quality. Yeah.
And he's been playing mostly on a bad team over the last couple of years in Houston. Houston, right? Is that Houston?
Yes. 3 years in Houston, and then he played the 2 games with the Clippers this year.
But I think that 26 pick is being underrated, in part because of the report that you and I put out that it was the least valuable of the 3 picks from Houston and OKC, along with the Clippers. So I think that's been slept on a little bit. Like, there's a brief period where I think people were like, oh my God, are they getting 2 unprotected Clippers picks back? They could really short on the Clippers. That would be great. It's not what it is, and I think that's leading to some people to underrate it. Really, to me, what that is about trade flexibility and, you know, skirting past the Stepien rule and being able to construct more trades than you could before. And also, crucially, being able to trade, you know, we've mentioned this before, that there are going to be a lot of teams out there shorting the Sixers' future because they're worried about, you know, Joel Embiid possibly asking out or whatnot.
Yeah.
Being able to trade more of your own picks becomes a little more valuable.
Yeah. So I think we're in agreement there. I think
if Batum has anything left, then he's the answer. I love the way he plays.
He's underrated in that he's a guy who's it's just a broad description, but just knows how to play. That you can ask to play a bunch of different roles.
He can make decisions.
He can play make a little bit. And when I say play make, it's not he's not taking guys off the dribble and doing anything crazy, but similar. He's like almost a bigger Melton, in that if you put him around the elbows and bench units and throwing passes there, he can make connected passes all over the floor. I think he's a smart team defender who unfortunately is getting older, but can play a few different.
It's very
it's
depressing.
Certainly happening to you and I.
Oh. I thought you were just going to cut it off at you. No. And I was like, man, that's a deep cut, but you're not wrong.
No. Listen, I only have so many more 2 a.m. trades left in me in this lifetime. So, but yeah, I think Batum is a connective piece in a ton of different ways on both ends of the floor. But KJ is we're going to roll the dice. We'll see if you can harness that athleticism on defense, certainly, and you can turn him into a consistent shooter. I mean, his first couple of years in the league, granted smaller roles and small volume, 36.5% his rookie year, 35.7 in year 2. Now, I took a step back last year. If you just say, hey, maybe this guy gets higher quality looks because he's playing with Maxey off of Joel Embiid, certainly is going to play in a lot of those and a lot of lineups with him, then maybe the improved shot quality, not playing with a bunch of bozos in Houston, ends up taking him to a different level as a shooter. And you know, it's a flyer, and it's only a flyer for now, but it's at least an interesting one.
Yeah. Ernest with another super chat as well. I do feel like if you give us money, we should probably bring up every question that you ask. So thank you, Ernest, for that. We really do appreciate that. Who would the Sixers trade for in December? Other than Levine, is there any team you can think that may trade a star in December? And again, a lot of these contracts that they just got back can't be aggregated, meaning you can't trade them along with other salaries outbound in a trade until basically January 1st. So it would be a little later in the season, but certainly before the deadline.
So they could make a Tobias-centric trade basically whenever. That would
require a higher level return, though.
Yes.
Because you actually use Tobias on the court.
Okay, so is there any other team? I guess we already brought it up, right? It's Toronto is one that I think jumps out at me. Now, there are caveats there, the most obvious one being the Nick Nurse relationship with all those guys. But would we put OG in that category, though? Because I think there's a lot of smoke out there regarding his relationship with Siakam, right? I don't think there's been as much speculation or reporting on the idea that Anunoby is like anti-Nurse or vice versa. So maybe that's a guy that if the bottom really drops out for Toronto, that they go and say, maybe we can make a move for him.
Yeah. No, you're looking for teams at the bottom will drop out. Toronto certainly is in that category. There's a reason that Chicago speculation is always out there. We'll see. I think it's easier now to find teams that want to retool and rebuild than it would have been when you were holding on to Harden. That's the benefit of having all of these expiring contracts and draft picks to trade, is that maybe they don't have more value than Harden specifically, although I think Harden's value is very narrow, but there's a much wider net of teams that would be interested in the package you have to offer. No, I mean, look, it is, like you mentioned, I'm happy to have our long national nightmare to be over. We can talk about something else. It might be the last time we talk about James Harden in
well, I was
quite
going
a
to say,
while.
how about we do a little bit of a retrospective here on what are you going to remember the most about James Harden's tenure in Philadelphia? Not that it was super long.
I feel like this is a Philly answer, and this is the way we go, but like it's hard for me not to remember Game 6 and 7 just because it felt like the end of a really great, like after Game 5, there were so many like columns being pre-written about the Sixers finally overcoming their second round demons and, putting down their longtime nemesis, and like this team is different. And that Game 5 victory was it gave you so much confidence that to come out and go 2 for 14 or whatever in almost the exact same way in back-to-back games, it really, like, he was attacking the rim and he had no interest in finishing over Rob Williams. And I think at times you get on Harden for lack of aggression or being too aggressive as a scorer. What really got to me was he didn't believe in his own shot at the rim in the end of that series. And watching him futilely kick out to 3-point shooters is the lasting impression. It will probably stick with me even more than the 40-point outbursts that he had, because it's just what made me terrified to give him that next contract. And I think probably made Daryl terrified to give him that contract too.
Well, we do have two different people, Biggie and JM, both saying the lasting Harden image is the Daryl Morey is a liar sign at the nightclub. So
you're not going to forget that one.
I think that is burned in my brain, along with the other sign that said I don't pull out or I won't pull out, which happened at the same nightclub on the same night, which that was really something. I think at the same time, I gained a deeper appreciation for Harden and also reconfirmed all my priors with Harden. And it's kind of weird, right? Like knowing who he is as a teammate and seeing the love and respect that he gets from Joel, from Tyrese, from D-House, Tuck, these guys whose careers he helped make, and hearing things about him as a guy to those guys, I thought was kind of eye-opening for me, because you hear that stuff from afar, but once you're up close and personal and you get to know these guys a little more, it's always certainly a little bit different. And I think for a while there, Harden was bought in the right ways, right? Yeah. Like he wanted to be about the right things, or tried to be about the right things. And whatever you say about how he handled the contract situation this summer, how his representation handled the contract situation this summer, last season, Doc has taken some shots at him, like, after the All-Star break.
Not Doc. He would never do that.
Doc tried to throw him under the bus a little bit and say he changed after the All-Star break.
No. Doc always takes full accountability for the
I'm being serious here, though. I'm saying James bought in most of the ways that he needed to buy in. He never was an off-ball shooter in the way that he needed to be, but he played in a way that showed he understood it's Joel's team and things need to go through Joel. And then when Joel goes down in the playoffs, I know it ended poorly, but James single-handedly won them game 1, and then single-handedly won them another game where Joel stunk it up in the fourth quarter and overtime. And so I do end up having some sympathy for him in the macro, and that I think his legacy is going to be a lot more complicated than people make it out to be, right? Like, has been this amazing offensive player who has had big moments and then ends up choking it all away in the bigger moments. And it's just hard to square how you can get a guy who can go out there and get 40 points in game 1, hit a game winner in a game 4, and still end up in a place where it's like, I'm so thrilled that guy's fucking not on my team anymore type of attitude.
Yeah. Honestly, I gave him so much credit throughout last season, because he did seem like he was buying into the role that not only he needed with this team, but I think that he needed to age gracefully throughout the latter stages of his career. And I thought like it had clicked for him. I thought both winning basketball and also the fact that he was not the player that he previously was in Houston had clicked for him. And just watching him on the court, you mentioned Doc, but watching him in the second half after the All-Star break, I didn't think he became like gunning James Harden on the court. I fundamentally disagreed with Doc on that evaluation. And watching him in the playoffs looked like a guy who acknowledged, I can't be the scorer that I was. That's why he was so focused on driving to kick out, not driving to score, because I felt like he was understanding where he was in his aging curve. And then everything that happened after that, from the report that he had that meeting with Ime where he's like, I could lead the league in scoring, to wanting to be a featured player again, to wanting to be paid like a featured player, it just like that illusion of him accepting his fate all came crashing down very quickly. And I was very nervous about giving him a contract because he didn't seem like he was ready to. It seemed like what he was doing that previous year was not where he was at mentally. And I don't want James Harden trying to score 30 a night. And when he's 34, 35,
I'd much
36.
rather Tyrese Maxey try to score 30 a night.
So it's very complicated legacy. Like I said, I gave him a lot of credit for most of last year for buying in. I'm just not sure I had any confidence going forward.
Yeah, and he really sealed the fact that nobody is ever going to trust him in a big moment for the rest of his career, which I think there were still a lot of people that, especially after you open that series the way he did, wanted to say, it's James Harden winning time. He's about the right things. And then he pulled the same disappearing act. We saw personally against Miami a year prior that the way they ended that series at home was in very similar fashion, where James is basically uninvolved in the offense and playing hot potato, not wanting to get involved or have his name be attached to the failure that they're experiencing. So it's just a tremendously weird guy and player in a bunch of different ways. And I'm hoping, Derek, I know I'm saying this, I would have to knock on every piece of wood in the known universe.
I don't know what you're saying, but I'll knock on some wood.
I'm hoping we will finally get to cover a normal basketball team, and that's the end result of
Are you naive?
all this.
Are you completely naive? How long have you been covering the team?
I just said I was going to knock on every piece of wood there is. I know it's not going to happen. Listen, I went to bed last night. I watched a horror movie and was like expecting a horror movie when I woke up from the team.
Watch?
Child's Play, the original one, not the new one.
Okay. No, look,
not bad, by the way. I wouldn't put it up there in the pantheon, but Chucky's certainly a great horror character for those who are.
I think they are currently set up to be a normal team. Will they follow through on that? Well, they haven't for the last decade, but we'll see. We'll give them a chance. I'm looking forward to the Embiid and Maxey show and see what they can build off of that.
We all silly like the mayor.